Hello. Those of you who were following along with me in my little countdown to 2026, which ended up actually being a countdown to Christmas, sorry about that. I took on way too much. I went from doing no videos at all to doing one a day for 25 days, and it was a lot. It was a good experience, though. I learned a good bit, and I'll be taking that forward as I continue to try to do videos, but it's going to be at a much more manageable pace of about 1 to 2 videos a month for now until I get into the swing of things. So today we're going to teach this winter scene. I really liked the pink sky in this in the photo that I found. The trees were actually different trees, but I thought pine trees would be a little bit easier to work with for now. So that's where we're going with that one. I will say in my practice, I did these little, there were some hills of snow in the front. I don't like those, so I'm going to cut those out. If you want to leave them in, feel free to. They just, it doesn't have the effect that I was going for, and it kind of just looks like some blobs in the front there. I'm just not happy with them. So we're going to omit those and just make it more of a hilly, snowy area up front, with the focus more on the this top half section, and just a small area of snow, and mostly the beautiful pink sky. Yeah, and I'm going to try to make this work so that I can still see the reference painting. I realized in my countdown that I should have painted things first and had that there as a reference. You can kind of see where we're going with things. And so that's something I'm working on fixing as I continue to do these kind of videos. And if there's anything else that you think would be helpful or beneficial, let me know. I want to learn how to be better supportive for those of you following along. So happy to listen to tips and tricks or suggestions of what you want me to share. Excuse me, sorry. I'm going to try not to clear my throat. It's very, very hard. It's winter here. It's a negative 45 out right now. The colds are going around, and it's just very, very difficult. And I'm going to try to keep this fairly short as well, but we'll see how it goes. Sorry, I'm going to take a quick drink of my coffee, and then let's get started. I'm going to do a quick light sketch just so I have some idea of where I want the horizon to go. It's a little, like there's hills of snow, so it's not a flat horizon, because there are, snowy bits up front. I don't know how bright it is, if you can see my line. I'm trying to keep it fairly light. And then do just a little bit here. It's like where the snow has piled up. And again, I'm ignoring those. Not going to put those in there. I also will point out that on this, when I was practicing, I actually did the little mist area at the bottom of the trees 3 different ways. And I'm going to go with my favorite for this class, and that's going to be over here, this one. For this, I kind of painted each tree, and as I did, I used a wet brush and lifted off some of the paint near the bottom. Over here, it's kind of similar, and another way you could do it. And this, I painted all the trees in a group there, and then I lifted after it was mostly starting to dry. And so that one works pretty much just as well. Those can be interchangeable. So we can kind of go both ways with that one. Over here, I kind of just removed some of the paint from my brush and painted lighter in this bottom section, and I just don't feel like it gives the misty feel as much as the other one, so we're not going to do that. But feel free to experiment and see what works best for you. I know a lot of times when I'm following a tutorial, the way somebody else does it doesn't work for me, and I have to do it in my own way. So please feel free to try out your own methods in the way that you want to do it. It is your painting, and you can do it however you want. I have some clean water that I will bring over here. I also have some that's a little purplish tinge, but we're using purple down here, so that'll be fine for there. Okay, so for the first bit, you want to use a slightly, like a bigger brush. This is my round 2. Oops, sorry, not on camera. This works. You can also use a mop brush we're just wetting the background and then dropping in color to make our gradient. So a mop brush works really well as well. You can also use a flat brush, whichever you prefer. I don't really use the flat brushes all that often personally. It just isn't one that I reach for on a regular basis. But if it works better for you, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and use, I think, the mop brush for now, just to get a nice even wet background. I might use the round, though, to drop in the color. I just prefer the rounds for that. I feel like the mops hold in a lot of water, and so it's harder to get the brighter, darker colors at the top. So if you have a mop brush, or whichever brush you're using, get it wet. Load it up with clean water. And we're just going to wet the background, the top, the sky area. It's okay if you go over into the bottom a bit, especially because it's not completely straight horizon line. So you can bring that in. You can follow along to the edge. You can overlap your line a little bit. We're going to have trees down there, so it's not a big deal. All right, and then perhaps we should have mixed the color beforehand. That's my fault. We're also going to take some Quin Gold and Quin Rose, and we're going to mix a nice peachy pink color for the sky. And you want it to be darker up near the top, and I think it looks better if it's more peach, like more pinkish than, I don't want it to be orange. So a little more pink maybe than the gold. All right. And we're going to start near the top, or at the top, I should say. And we're just going to go across with the darker color. Get a nice bit of color on there. And then as we go, we're not going to add more paint necessarily. We're just going to bring that down, get more water on. You can get a little more paint, but not too much, because we do want the color to go all the way down. We just want it to be lighter in color. So I'm adding more water as I pick up a little more paint. And you can see that it's getting a little bit lighter down near the bottom, but it still has that pink tint. I don't want the sky to be clear. So I want there to be some definite pinkish peach color in the sky. And I will say I like how dark mine is over here. This one's quite light. So I'm actually going to mix up just a little bit more of that color, more pink. And I'm going to start, I'm just going to go back over again real quick while it's all still wet. If yours is started to dry, you might want to wait till the whole thing is dry, wet it again, and then do another layer. Either way works. It kind of depends on if you want a more solid colored sky, or if you don't mind seeing some of those lines, because as it starts to dry, it will create more lines in your sky if you go back over it with some wet paint without letting it fully dry. But I don't mind. I like how straight or clear this one was, like a solid gradient. This was actually a really good gradient sky here. It doesn't have too many marks in the sky. I really like that, but I also don't mind when there's some lines in the sky, because it kind of just gives the impression of like some clouds. So like this one, as you can see right here, there's a little bit of lighter areas in the sky. And we're just going to see how that dries. And if we want to do another layer on our sky before we do our trees, we can do that. So I'm going to pause for just a second to let that dry a bit. It does not need to dry completely because we're going to work on the snow before we go to the trees. But it does need to be completely dry before we do the trees. Otherwise, our trees are going to bleed out into the sky, which isn't bad for a distant layer of trees. But for these detailed trees, we want to have the background be dry before we work on that. So I'm just going to pause for a quick minute, mainly because I have to go check on something outside real quick. And then we'll get ready to move on to our snow. Okay, I am back. It was really like less than a minute. So we are going to go ahead and get started on the snow. And for that, we are going to use a little bit of French Ultramarine Blue, which you can't really see on my palette. It's way in the back, but I'm going to move it up front here. Maybe you can see that. That might still be out of view, and for that I apologize. I can't tell. Okay, so we have some French ultramarine blue, and we're going to take a little bit of this rose of ultramarine and make a purplish blue. I really like purple and even the dark blue on its own for shadows. And I think maybe that's why I didn't like this. The snow is just a little too blue, and I don't think it gives the impression of snow and shadows like I would like. But for the smaller shadows that we're going to do in the background, this will work. And we can get some water in there too to make it a really, really light color. We're going to do some darker colors too in a bit, but we'll start with the lighter ones and build up. So good bit of water on your brush. I'm using my round 2 again. You can use something smaller if you want. It's up to you. We're just doing like just different areas of shadows where there's like indentations in the snow. Is this still okay? Making sure that's still in view. I would hate to paint and have you guys miss it. So we're just following the slope of the snowy hills back here and adding in just a bit of these little like indentations in the snow patches. And the shapes kind of are different, but on the hill, like this is kind of a hill back here. And so they kind of slope downwards at an angle to give that impression of hill. It almost looks like, I don't know, somebody maybe walked up there, or they just, when it snowed, it landed in pockets of different things. Maybe there's some bushes under there that's built upon. I'm not sure. But it's not, they're not 100%, they're not even. They're just sporadically in here. And it might look a little funny when you first put them on there. I like to paint them on, and then after they've dried a little bit, get a wet brush to spread them out a bit so that they're a little less, I don't know, all over the place. This area here is going to be covered with some bushes, so it's actually not super important, but I'm going to put a little bit of shadow on there too. Over here, the hill goes this way. We're off to the side now, and so our shadows are going to face a slightly different direction. And then we have some all through here. And then down here it's more flat. And so the shadows actually give that kind of impression, and they lay more flat. So the angle of your brush can kind of give a little insight into what is going on the ground. As you slope down the hill, and then over here there's some that go up. Yeah, not a big deal. And like I said, I'm ignoring the big hills. I just am not a huge fan of how those looked, so I'm changing it. If you want to have the hills in there, you are welcome to, just again following the slopes, and they're more shadowed because they're bigger slopes compared to the snow that's in front of it. And right now this just looks like kind of a blobby mess, and that is okay. We're gonna take just a little bit of water and kind of just soften them a little. So I'm just running the water over the bits of snow that I just added. It's okay if the color kind of blends out because there's a lot of shadow in snow. And so that's what we're doing, is blending the color a little bit, getting rid of some of those hard lines from our brush strokes. Can still kind of go in the direction of the brush strokes, and we will be adding just a hint of that pink in our snow a bit as well, because with the snow being white, it's going to reflect some of that sky color, and so there will be little bits of pink in our snow, especially up front here near the base of the painting. It's really pink, and actually we can do that right now while it's a little wet from what we just dropped in. You want a really, really light color over here, so lots of water I'm just pulling some of that color over. But we don't want to overpower it with a lot of pink down here. And I'm just kind of going along, following the path of the hills and the snow, but it's just hints of color to reflect the sky. And right now it does still kind of look like a blob with all the things. Once we add in some of the bushes inside here, it will help let our eyes know what's going on in here, because right now it's a little confusing. Okay, but now we need to let that dry a bit. Need to check on our sky, which is still pretty damp. I can tell because the paper is still really, really cool right there. If you just hold your hand above it, you can kind of feel that it's still damp. And you don't want to push into it too much or you'll lift paint and leave marks on your painting. So let's give it a little bit of time to dry, because we don't want to start our trees while it's still damp. So for this one, I am going to pause and take a break, and I will come back in a moment. And actually, just one before we go, if yours is looking like mine, I have this lovely like dark band up top here, but then it's really, really light right underneath it, and I don't like that. I want more of that color down low, at least a little bit. So I'm going to let this dry, but then I'm going to do another layer on the sky. To kind of show you what we do when we want to darken something like our sky, and it's already dried. And so we'll do that, and then we are going to have to pause again. So this is going to take a few minutes longer than I would have originally planned for it to take, simply because we have to let that dry completely. If you have a heated craft tool, you can use the blow dryer, the heated craft tool, which is like a blow dryer, but it doesn't blow near as forcefully as a blow dryer. If you have one, you can use that to kind of speed up the drying process, since that's all we're doing is waiting for it to dry. I don't typically use it as often. I'd much rather just move on to something else and wait for it to dry. That's just typically how I paint. But if you're in a hurry and you don't want to wait, feel free to use something like that to help speed up the process. Just be careful, especially if you're using an actual blow dryer. They blow much more forcefully, and you don't want it to blow your paint. It'll give you a really neat effect, but may not work for the painting we're going for. So just something to keep in mind. But I'm going to go ahead and pause. I will be back in just a bit when we're ready to do that second layer of the sky, and then we'll move on to our trees when everything is dry. Okay, I am back. The painting, I think, is dry enough. And we are just going to wet the whole sky again with plain water, and then dropping color again like we did before, starting strong, a little stronger up top, not too much because that is already a dark color that we're liking, but then we're going to blend more down. I got a little bit of a bleed here when I went back in and added some more before it was dry. So that's that's the risk of adding more color when your painting is starting to dry, and then the levels of dryness are not the same, and it's tricky. So I'm going to use my mop brush again and get some clean water and just start at the top. And I'm just going to run down the paper toward the snow. I'm going to try not to cover the snow, especially this time. I don't, because I've already painted where the snow is. I don't want to go over too much. I am going to take this peachy pink that I had made earlier that I still have, and I'm going to drop that color in, going all the way across. Oh, sorry about that. My dryer is done. Okay, blending it down, trying to make sure we still have some color in here. I don't want it to be too light yet, but I do want it to get lighter as it gets closer to the ground. That is the overall goal. All right, and the more you go over a few times, the more you're going to get these lines in here. And that is where the flat brush could be useful. I've seen a lot of people do it. You just go side to side with the flat brush, side to side. It covers a bigger area than the round, and it makes for a more even gradient wash. So that is something to consider, and maybe I'll use this in another video just so you can see maybe a little bit of the difference. It isn't a brush I use on a regular basis, but it can be helpful. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry. I do think it is still gonna be a little more of an uneven sky than the original, but that is okay. We're gonna go with it. While we let that dry, because again, it needs to dry completely before we start our trees, we can go in and do a little bit more of the darker, there's a few darker shadows of the snow, just to make it more clear what's going on here. And we can start adding some of the little bits of grass that stick up in the snow, just as long as we're not touching the top part of the painting. So for this, I'm going to use a smaller round for the shadows, just to have a little more control. So this is a Princeton Round 4. I'm going to use some more of that purplish blue that we made earlier using the French Ultramarine and the Rose of Ultramarine color. We can make it a little more blue there. All right. And so we're just going to go through and just find a few areas to add just some darker shadows here and there. It doesn't need to be a specific way. You can pick which shadows you want to be kind of more pronounced. They're just kind of mixed in here. It won't be wrong. Just some areas of the snow are more shadowed than others, but they all kind of blend together. And they're going in that same general direction. And here we have, it's like the top of the hill here is a little more shadowed. And it actually, I'm going to cover some of these snowy areas that we had before, because this actually covers this area in this picture that I'm looking at. And because I got rid of the stuff up front, I wasn't paying that much attention, but that I think is still very useful there. Okay, and I'm just going to add a few more darker snow shadows in here. I'm going to smooth out some of those lines with some water. That can be helpful. And just following the lines of the snow there. Okay. All right, so we did that. Now I'm going to use a liner brush. This fine point. Actually, this one's technically a double or a 000 round, so it's a round, but it's the same, very similar to a liner brush, which is great for doing the trees and doing these little grassy textures here. And I'm going to use, so I'm going to spin my palette just a bit because I already have some mixed here so you can see. It's some of that Rose of Ultramarine mixed with Sepia, just to make a really, really dark purple, like a blackish purple. And you can use, I didn't mention this before, obviously, but if you don't have the same colors, any blue and pink to make a purple. For the purples, Or if you have a different purple, you can use that as well. You don't have to use the exact same colors that I'm using. Okay, and so for this, we're just going to go through and add some little pointy grassy bits. Trying not to shake my whole desk when I paint. I don't want the camera to shake either. But yeah, there's just some grass textures here. And they just go along in little clusters, really. And they could probably be different colors. I mean, there's, in the picture, it looks like it could be a little bit of a brown and maybe even a hints of some golden yellows and stuff, but I'm just going with this whole color scheme and sticking with the dark purple, which is going to match the trees that we're going to add, because we're going to use the same color to add in our pine trees here in a bit. And for these grass textures, you just want the little flicks to go every direction, not just one. They're sticking up in different directions here. And there's just a little sections here that kind of let us know that there's like hills all throughout here. Okay, and I'm just doing a little bit of just hinting at the tops of the snow here, but we're gonna really get that blended out when we add in our trees here in a bit. There's a nice little section back here actually that also has some grassy textures, but then there's a little bit more snow in the background. You can just barely see back there. Okay. And now this picture is a reference photo I found on Unsplash. The trees are regular, like deciduous type trees that are bare because it's winter. And those are just really, really hard to paint. It might be something fun to try eventually. But just getting all the branches and stuff is can be tricky. And I just thought it would be easier to work with pine trees for this one. So we're gonna wait just a little bit longer because it's not fully dry. The only thing I am gonna do is, while we're waiting, I'm getting a little bit more of the sepia and some more of this rose of ultramarine to make a nice dark purple, because there are some areas in here where our grasses are that would look nice with a little bit of extra dark bits thrown in there, so it's not just one layer. That adds some depth to it. And so that's a good little trick to add. Kind of like how we did with our shadows. We layered on some darker areas. And adding those in the grasses is very helpful as well. So it's not all one color. It implies shadows and other things when you can see the different layers there. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm gonna pause for a little bit while I let the rest of my sky dry completely. I do so far like how it's drying. It's much darker. I like it better. Did lose a little bit of the light color at the bottom, but most of that's going to be covered with trees. And we're going to lift some of the color out here to do that mist. I'm not too worried about it, but give your painting a little bit of time to dry as well. and I will be back in just a minute so that we can get started on those trees. All right, I am back, and I am sure my background is fairly dry. If it bleeds a little bit, that's okay. It'll just look like some distant trees, and we can do another layer on top. Things like this, when you can make those adjustments, it's okay to kind of jump ahead a little bit and not worry as much about whether it's completely dry. We can make different adjustments too to make it more your own. For example, in the original picture, the trees are all in one line, steady straight across in the horizon. I made this middle section look like the trees are further back. They're lighter in color. So it looks like there's like a group of trees here and a group of trees here, but there's a gap in the middle there. You don't have to do that. If you don't want to, you can make them all the same, going straight across. You can only have some of the trees and maybe leave some out. It's entirely up to you how you want to do the trees. But I will go ahead and show you what we're going to do is I'm going to paint the tree, and then we're going to lift some of the color out. And actually, it depends on which one you prefer. You can't really tell much of a difference here, like I mentioned before, between the ones where I lifted as I was painting, and then these ones where I painted, I let it dry, and then I lifted a little bit afterwards. And this paper isn't the same as what I'm painting on. I'm painting on the arches 100% cotton paper, and I think the lifting will actually work a little bit better here, even if it's already dry. So I might go for this version here, where we kind of paint all the trees, and then we go back and we'll lift out some of that color for the mist afterwards. So we'll play with that a little bit as we go. But just something to keep in mind if you wanted to lift as you go. If your paper's not quite handling it as well, might be something to experiment with to see if it's better to lift as you go or just go all in. So we're just gonna do some pine trees along the way here. If you watched my first video of the countdown to 2026, I demonstrated, how to do pine trees. You're gonna just do a line. It's okay if you lift a little bit. It's just to keep your tree straight. And then I'm using the liner brush, and you're just gonna do little dabs on each side. They don't need to be perfect. You want them to kind of point every which way, like pine needles on a pine tree would. And we will get progressively wider and away from the tree as we go down the tree. And you can skip some areas if you want it to look like it's missing branches here and there. That's how many pine trees in real life look. I have a bad habit of being a little too symmetrical with my pine trees, unintentionally. It's an easy thing to do. So if you want to purposefully try to separate yours more, and have your branches be a little more uneven, that might be helpful. That's right. I'm just going to keep, as we go, mixing up a little bit more of the dark purple we're using, because I want to make sure that we have plenty as we paint these. All right. Sorry. And at the bottom, it's a little less important how it's looking, simply because we're going to lift a lot of that. But to have that, to make it look more misty, you do want it to look like there are branches behind it, and so it's better to paint it as realistically as possible from the get-go. Okay, and so remember to alternate the heights of your trees. In nature, they're not all going to be the same height. You also don't want, your brain will tend to try to make patterns whether you mean to or not. So careful, you might have high, low, high, low, high, low. Try to purposefully vary them up a little bit more. Have like 2 low and 1 lower, and then go higher, and just alternating the heights of the trees. You can have some that are very, very close, but then you also want to have a good difference in height as well. But it's just one of those things you gotta kind of think as you're going, and you get to mindlessly kind of keep going along. You don't even realize you're making a pattern until it's done. And you're like, whoop. Unintentionally made a pattern. Okay, and so I'm going to have a slightly taller one here now. Going to have branches stick out in different directions and ways. Maybe I want a more straggly looking pine tree. Mine tend to be really full looking pine trees. It's just, I don't even necessarily do it intentionally. That's just how they always seem to come out. And I have to remind myself to leave more gaps in there so that some are less full than others and look more natural. Okay. This part is just a lot of repetitive, just doing the trees. It takes time. I apologize if I talk about the same stuff over and over again. I don't always know what to fill the space with. I don't want to just talk about nonsense. I like to try to keep it related to what we're doing. But when we're doing the same thing over and over again, there's only so much I feel like I can share. So I apologize if it gets a little boring. Oop. Okay. I do try to have it be a little more full in the middle, just because I feel like on a pine tree, regardless, you would have, because of the trunk, there is going to be more going on in the middle there, and it can be a little less full further away from the middle. But that is, again, something that you get to decide how you're going to handle on your painting. You can even use completely different colors if you'd like. I really liked the orange and the purple together on this in the reference. And so I stuck with those for this picture. So I'm running out of my sepia here. Trying to get a little more. Make sure I keep the colors going. I want to go a little farther with these front trees before I move. I liked how my reference that I made looked with the distant trees. So I am going to do that again here in a bit. Make it look like this little section of trees ends. And there's some in the distance. And so I'm going to do that again. Just want to get a little farther here before I do that. So probably right around here. And then to make your trees look like they're more in the distance, they are lighter, mainly in a landscape because of atmospheric perspective. The air in front of us in the distance just makes them look lighter. And we're adding mist in here too, which would make them look even lighter than usual, I would say. So you're going to use a lighter color for those. You're also going to want to make them look smaller because the further away something is, the smaller it appears. So those distant trees are all going to be lighter and shorter than the ones up front. And that just gives us the depth and just makes them look like these trees are further in the distance from the ones we just painted. And because they're so far back, they don't even need to be as detailed. We just need the shape, the basic shape of the tree. and our brain will know that those are trees. But because they're further away, we wouldn't see as many details, and so we don't have to paint them as detailed. And they're not a lot shorter, so they're not like super far in the distance. Maybe we could do a few that are shorter. But they're not in the same level as these ones over here are. And that's the main thing we're trying to show here. Is that they are further away. Okay. I think I'll do one last one that is lighter. Then we'll do these darker ones. And then we are going to go try to lift out our mist and see how it goes. Okay, so we need to go back, get some more sepia and some more of the rose of ultramarine or whatever purple you're using to make a nice dark purple. You might already have a dark purple, that's fine. And then these ones can definitely overlap the ones you just did in the background because these are in front. Back to being a little more detailed. I'm actually trying to make this one a little more sparse than some I have done. Because, you know, that's how they are. You have pine trees that are full, you have pine trees that are sparse and just don't have as much to them. They all exist in nature. And this is one of the more time-consuming parts of this painting, is just including all those trees. And if you don't want to, you can have less trees. Your painting would probably look just as fine if you decide to just only do the trees on one side. Maybe there's a section there where it doesn't have a lot of trees, and that's okay. I already started. I'm kind of all in on this now. I don't want my painting to be too uneven if I only do one side of it. And that's something you would just have to kind of decide, like, do you need more? Is your painting balanced enough? Sometimes if you have enough stuff in the foreground and other areas, then you don't really need to fill in the rest. And then of course it depends on, like, if you want to go based on your picture. My picture had the trees going all the way across, and so I'm trying to stay close to that at least. Like I said, I changed what trees I used, but I did like all the purple that goes across and breaks up where the horizon is and where the sky is. So it's kind of a personal preference as far as that goes. But trying to hurry this along, so I am kind of speeding through my trees. Whoops, I almost dropped my paintbrush. I do that all the time. Usually it lands on my paper and makes a bit of a mess. I saved it that time, so that's good. Call that a win. All right, let's see. Fit at least another tree or two in here. I'll do another short one here. All right, and then we'll get one right up in here. Nice tall one again. Tall ones are nice because they'll fill out wider. It'll fill in this space that I have on the edge of my painting. Okay. All right, now that we have all the trees in there, they're all added, they're all painted, it looks great. So let's do that mist. I'm gonna take my round 2 again. I'm going to wet my brush, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to lift. Press into the paper, wiggle it around. I will say I don't think I waited as long to do even that one section of trees, and I probably should have done this as we went a little bit. I do think I liked how that looked and how it worked. The other thing that we can do that I've seen people do is use bleed-proof white for some of the mist. And since we're struggling for this to lift up, let me just show you a little bit of what that would look like. So we get some bleed-proof white and we'll throw it on here and then kind of blend it in and out a bit. But in combination with the lifting, the bleed-proof white can work really, really well as a mist. So I fully meant to, I got distracted while we started painting and I didn't lift any of the trees as we went. Like maybe if we lift over here on this side, since we just finished it, maybe it would lift a little bit easier. It's funny. I thought it would lift better on this paper. This just goes to show you, even though you've been doing this for a while. I do it usually if I know I'm going to lift something, I do try to lift it sooner than later. And that's on me. I should have lifted it sooner. I did not, but that's okay because we are improvising. And creating some mist with that bleed-proof white. And you just want to kind of blend it so you don't have like the dots of the bleed-proof white that I added in there. And even here, because we would still have mist in front of these trees, it just looks a bit different. There. Look, I thought I was so prepared because I painted it first and I tried all the different ways to lift, and then this is not behaving the way I expected it to. But it just goes to show you. But we're just lifting kind of in a small area at the base of the tree. It's like it's a small area of mist. And you don't even have to have the mist if you don't want to. The picture had the mist. I liked the look of the mist, and I thought it would be fun to share that technique, different ways to do it. And here we are experimenting with some different ways to do it and dropping in the bleed-proof white. We're lifting, and we're kind of doing a combination of all the different ways to do it right here. So a little bit of experimentation, which, by the way, is one of my New Year's resolutions this year. I'm trying to explore and experiment more and try new things. So I am not mad about this going a little bit differently than I intended, because it's how we learn, right? So yeah. Oops. All right. And there we go. I'm going to call that good. It will dry a little bit. The bleed-proof white will look a little bit differently as it dries. But let me know what you think. Let me know how you did your trees. Did you do your mist? Did you change it up a little bit? Love to hear your thoughts. And I will be getting together a Valentine's type themed video for in the next week or two. A landscape in the shape of a heart. I'm teaching a live class here locally, and kind of to prep myself, it's my first live class, to prep myself and get prepared, I am going to film an example here for you guys on YouTube to get to see kind of how that one works. So be on the lookout for that in the next week or two. All right, and thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.